Let's bring you this important discussion now. Labour and Employment Minister Thulas Nxesi says around 75,000 workers have been affected by the recent unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. The department will now develop and issue new directives to try help those affected in a matter of days, we're told, but the criteria will be strict as these funds are limited. For more on this, let's bring in the Department of Labour and Employment's Director-General, that's Thobile Lamati, who joins us now via our video link. Thobile, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time for us, sir. So my understanding is that about 5.3 billion rand has been offered now to the COVID-19 Ters Fund as an extension. How many more people do you reckon that will assist?
Good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers, and thanks for having me. Ayanda, we are anticipating that of that 75,000 that are affected, we know that there are a number of them that, as a consequence of some of these companies that will not be coming back for whatever reason, we will have to pay them the normal unemployment insurance fund benefit that is given to people who have lost employment. Secondly, you have a cohort of workers that, because a number of the employers have indicated their commitment to rebuild their companies, they would want to keep them keep them employed. So we want to assist those employers so that they don't carry the burden of, whilst they are rebuilding their companies, they also have to take care of the salaries or salaries or wages of these employees. So the 5.3 billion that was set aside for COVID and Ters benefit will also be used for this initiative, so that we can assist those workers. But also the companies that will, that especially the smaller ones that will be in distress as a result of this unrest. We have what we call a normal Ters benefit, which these companies can apply for, and we also will use this money to make sure that we assist those companies that are in distress.
Right. It was interesting to hear the minister say that even those workers who don't necessarily qualify for UIF, at least if our current legislation is anything to go by, those people too may be able to get some kind of relief. Speak to us about that process. How will you be sifting through those who legitimately should be getting this aid versus perhaps those taking a chance?
We have decided that we have decided to extend the process that we used for the COVID Ters, where we ask the employers to apply on behalf of the employees. Now, what we will be looking at is whether the company is indeed a registered company, and secondly, whether they have declared their employees with the unemployment insurance fund. So they may have declared them, but have not been contributing, or the workers may have been contributing, the employers may not have been passing the money over to the unemployment insurance fund. So we will use those systems that we have in place to check whether indeed this person is an employee, and there's an employer and employee relationship. So what we're trying to do here, I think Vusi Tenjekwayo put it nicely yesterday when he said government should assist companies that are affected, not companies that are complying. So there's a provision in the unemployment insurance fund legislation that empowers the commissioner to deem a certain group of employees as employees that were contributing, especially if the reason for not contributing was not something that they had control over. For instance, if the employer did not declare them, it's not the fault of the employees. Or secondly, if the employer was deducting the contribution but not paying over to the UIF, that's not the fault of the employees, and therefore you cannot penalize the employees for that.
Speaking about compliance, yesterday there was also mention of trying to do things differently this time to try close the noose on possibilities of fraud. Among the interventions, if you like, is now looking at paying the employees directly as opposed to giving that money to their employers who will then pass on that money. In the past, we have seen evidence of the money not being passed on to the actual workers. But that presupposes that all workers will have a bank account to which you can actually send that money. Now, I'll be open in saying I'm not quite sure how many workers in this day and age don't have bank accounts. But, I mean, how would you deal with that kind of problem?
Look, and for the COVID Ters, we've paid just over 5.4 million workers, and we've paid just over 61 billion. So we have not had a situation where employees are saying they don't have a bank account. But in instances like those, we have an appeals process that workers can exhaust, so that we can see with the working with their employers how we can assist them. Anyway, we've always been working with banks. So in instances where an employee does not have a bank account, we can call on any of the banks that we've been working with to assist that employee so that they can open a bank account. We cannot, and in this day and age, we will not be able to give people, cannot pay people cash, give them money and they come to us. And we have a COVID situation. We want to make sure that we discourage people from coming to our offices, and that's why we want the employers to be the ones who continue to apply on behalf of the employees.
Are we able to track how many employers in the recent past actually didn't pass on the relief to their workers? Because that to me sounds like fraud.
We have been able to track. Remember, we announced at the very beginning of the rollout of the COVID test benefit that we'll embark on what we call follow the money. And we appointed a number of firms to audit the companies, and we've picked up quite a few, and we are now processing that, and very soon we'll release a report that indicates the number of those employers who have not passed on the money, and the steps that we've taken to force them to do so, including reporting them to the enforcement agencies.
Yeah. Another sticking issue which you actually addressed in the briefing yesterday is around whether or not employers can compel their workers to take a COVID-19 vaccine. You spoke of certain controls at the disposal of different working environments, and you said vaccines is one of those controls. But I guess the thrust of your sentiment was it'll have to be each workplace themselves deciding through collaboration whether or not there is to be a policy that compels people to take a COVID-19 vaccine. Do you reckon that provides enough clarity, though? Because the morning after, it appears the debate is still continuing about whether or not government shouldn't just pronounce on the issue.
Look, it does provide enough clarity, but the difficulty here, you're trying to deal with three things, right? The rights of people that are in the Constitution, and secondly, you're trying to deal with the public health issue, and thirdly, you're trying to deal with the rights of the employers to operate their big businesses, and the responsibility and trust, entrusted upon them by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which says they must make sure that their workplaces supports the protection of health and safety of the workers, and they must take steps to make sure that whatever risk that has been identified, it's mitigated, and that's why I spoke about the hierarchy of controls, and the vaccine being the one of those controls that supplements your administrative and engineering controls. So it's not a straightforward thing, because, if you run a company and you're saying, for me to be able to do X, Y, and Z, I need to make sure that everybody is safe and everybody is healthy in this environment. And if you then come and say as an employee and say, no, I don't want to be vaccinated, and you don't provide a plausible reason for that, you just say, well, vaccination is not mandatory and therefore I'm not going to. to take the vaccine. The employers have a right to, in terms of the Labor Relations Act, to act on you because you are interfering with and then actually you are in contravention of their health and safety policies. But also we're saying to companies, you can't just, take drastic steps to dismiss people or subject them to a disciplinary process without explaining to them, what are the risks in the workplace and part of your mitigating steps, you're introducing vaccine, and what are the risks that are associated with the vaccine, and what will happen to people who don't want to take the vaccine? Are you going to apply what is called reasonable accommodation, move them to other places? How do you deal with the rights of people who will say, I'm not going to work with Ayanda because he's not vaccinated and we are vaccinated? So they have a lot of, employers have a lot of, they have a lot to think about. They must not just act arbitrarily. But of course, there's a point that was made by Healy in the morning that in every situation, it needs to be tested. And the courts and the CCMA have always produced excellent results in terms of testing.
Sure.
The feasibility of the law that we have. Yeah. So this still needs to be tested, but we're cautioning employers not to act in a manner that will not protect the rights of the people.
Got you. I certainly do get the impression that you can't really superimpose any one rule across a variety of work environments.
No.
So fair enough. Of course, the situation we're dealing with now in the form of the reliefs being provided to many workers is being welcomed, the relief that is, but in many respects is also seen as some kind of interim measure. Get us, I guess, to understand what government is doing, Thobile, to try and address the fact that we still are working with a labor market that is, by and large, not absorbing workers. And that's why we're seeing the unemployment rate we're seeing, and many people will say the ripple effect is the stagnant growth in our economy too. I would hope that we're not sort of moving our eye off that target too, trying to ensure that there's more absorption in the labor market, because I'm sure you'll agree that is more sustainable than paying out UIF reliefs every now and again.
No, that's true. In fact, that's a very important point. And in the presentation made by the Minister of Finance yesterday, he made a point that says we're providing support so that the productive sectors are able to do what they're supposed to do. They're able to do their businesses, to be productive, so that they can absorb workers. Now, it's a pity that we this unrest, came about when the economy was slowly picking up. You remember again that President announced the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. Government is still committed to that, and we are monitoring the implementation of that. Of course, the unrest has, in the two provinces, has set us back, but we're determined, working with the social partners at NEDLEC, to make sure that that plan is implemented. In fact, now we need to move at a much faster pace than we were moving, given the challenge that has been brought about by the unrest in the two provinces.
Thobile, thanks very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate your helping us break down some of these developments. Thobile Lamati is the DG at the Employment and Labour Department. Once again, thanks very much indeed.